Millionaire paralyzed by employee's words when the employee accidentally sees a photo. The old photograph sat innocently on Robert Sinclair's desk, its edges worn and colors faded with time. To most, it was just another personal memento in a corporate office. But for Ethan, the young intern who had recently started working at Sinclair Enterprises, that photo would become the key to unlocking a mystery that had shaped his entire life. As Ethan's eyes fell upon the image, his breath caught in his throat. The woman in the picture bore an uncanny resemblance to his mother, Jennifer. Same chestnut hair, same gentle eyes, same warm smile. But how could that be? His mother had never mentioned knowing his boss, let alone being close enough to have her picture on his desk. The resemblance was so striking that Ethan found himself unable to look away. He leaned in closer, his heart pounding in his chest. The woman in the photo was younger, perhaps in her early 20s, but there was no mistaking that smile. It was the same smile that had comforted him through countless childhood fears and celebrated every small victory. Ethan's mind raced with questions. Who was this woman to Robert Sinclair? Why had his mother never mentioned knowing the billionaire CEO? And why did he have such an intimate photo of her on display? As he stood there, lost in thought, Ethan didn't notice Robert Sinclair entering the office. The older man's voice cut through his reverie like a knife. "Is everything all right, Ethan?" Ethan jumped, nearly knocking over a stack of files on the desk. He turned to face his boss, his face flushed with embarrassment and confusion. "I'm sorry, Mr. Sinclair, I was just that photo." Robert's eyes followed Ethan's gaze, and for a moment, a shadow passed over his face. Something akin to pain, or perhaps regret, flickered in his eyes before he quickly composed himself. "Ah, yes," he said softly, almost to himself. "A dear friend from long ago." The way Robert said friend made Ethan's skin prickle. There was a weight to the word, a history that seemed to hang in the air between them. Ethan opened his mouth to ask more, but the look in Robert's eyes stopped him. Instead, he mumbled an apology and hurried out of the office, his mind reeling. As he made his way back to his cubicle, Ethan couldn't shake the image from his mind. That photograph had opened a door to a past he never knew existed, and he was determined to find out the truth, no matter where it might lead him. Ethan Carter was the epitome of the American dream in progress. At 22, he stood on the precipice of greatness, his sharp mind and unwavering determination earning him a coveted internship at Sinclair Enterprises. With his unruly mop of dark hair and bright, inquisitive eyes, Ethan exuded an air of youthful ambition tempered by a maturity beyond his years. The gleaming skyscraper that housed Sinclair Enterprises was a stark contrast to Ethan's humble beginnings. Glass and steel stretched towards the sky, housing rows of cubicles and corner offices where important decisions were made daily. For Ethan, it was a new world, filled with the constant hum of phones, the click-clack of keyboards, and the aroma of freshly brewed coffee. At the helm of this corporate giant was Robert Sinclair, a man whose name was synonymous with success and power. At 50, Robert cut an imposing figure with his salt and pepper hair and piercing blue eyes. His presence commanded respect, yet there was an underlying vulnerability that Ethan had noticed in quiet moments. Robert's office, perched high above the city, was a testament to his status, a sanctuary of mahogany and leather, where deals were struck and fortunes made. But Ethan's world extended beyond the glittering facade of Sinclair Enterprises. At the heart of his life was his mother, Jennifer. At 38, Jennifer was young for a mother of a 22-year-old, a fact that often raised eyebrows. Her chestnut hair and gentle eyes mirrored Ethan's, and her smile could light up a room. Despite the hardships of single motherhood, Jennifer had managed to create a warm, loving home for her son. Their apartment, though small, was filled with laughter and the scent of home-cooked meals. Family photos adorned the walls, telling the story of their life together. Yet there was a conspicuous absence in these images: Ethan's father, Michael. The subject was a closed book, one that Jennifer refused to open. As Ethan navigated his new role at Sinclair Enterprises, he couldn't shake the feeling that there was more to Robert Sinclair than met the eye. The way the older man looked at him sometimes, with a mix of fondness and something akin to regret, puzzled Ethan. It was as if Robert knew something about him, a secret just beyond Ethan's grasp. Little did Ethan know that the photograph on Robert's desk was just the tip of an iceberg of secrets. As he stepped into the office each morning, straightening his too large tie and trying to look professional, he was walking into a web of past relationships, hidden truths, and long-buried emotions. The stage was set for a story that would challenge everything Ethan thought he knew about his family, his boss, and himself. In the coming days, the lines between personal and professional would blur, and the truth would prove stranger than fiction. As Ethan settled into his new routine, he couldn't have imagined how his life was about to change. The secrets hidden within the walls of Sinclair Enterprises and his own home were about to collide in a way that would leave no one unscathed. The photograph haunted Ethan's thoughts, a persistent whisper in the back of his mind. He found himself stealing glances at Robert's office, half expecting to catch another glimpse of that mysterious image. The resemblance to his mother was undeniable, yet the implications were unfathomable. One evening, as Ethan helped Jennifer prepare dinner, the sizzle of onions in the pan and the familiar scent of his mother's cooking usually brought comfort, but tonight they only heightened his sense of unease. "Mom," he began cautiously, his heart pounding, "did you know Mr. Sinclair before I started working for him?" Jennifer's hand slipped, the knife she was holding clattering to the counter. "What makes you ask that?" she said, her voice unnaturally high. Ethan hesitated, then plunged ahead. "I saw a photo of you on his desk today. You looked younger, but it was definitely you." The color drained from Jennifer's face. She gripped the edge of the counter, her knuckles turning white. It's complicated, Ethan," she finally said. "There are things about my past, about our family, that I've never told you." Ethan felt as if the floor was shifting beneath his feet. "What things, Mom? What aren't you telling me?" Jennifer opened her mouth to respond, then closed it again. The silence stretched between them, heavy with unspoken truths. "I think it's time we talked," she finally said, her voice barely above a whisper. As they sat down at the kitchen table, the half-prepared dinner forgotten, Ethan couldn't help but feel that he was standing on the precipice of something life-changing. Whatever his mother was about to reveal, he knew instinctively that it would alter the course of their lives forever. Jennifer's hands trembled as she clasped them on the kitchen table. The familiar surroundings, the faded curtains, the chipped mug filled with pens, the refrigerator covered in Ethan's childhood drawings suddenly felt alien. She took a deep breath, her eyes meeting her son's expectant gaze. "Ethan," she began, her voice barely above a whisper, "the man you know as Mr. Sinclair, he's not just your boss. But he's someone from my past, someone very important." The words hung in the air, heavy and surreal. Ethan felt as if he'd been plunged into icy water, his mind struggling to process this revelation. "But how? Why didn't you ever tell me?" he stammered, a mixture of confusion and hurt coloring his voice. Jennifer's eyes welled with tears. "It's a long and painful story, sweetheart. Robert and we have a history that I've tried very hard to leave behind." As Jennifer recounted the tale, Ethan listened in stunned silence. She spoke of her youth, of dreams and ambitions, and of a love that had burned bright and fast. The pain of past decisions was still raw in her voice, even after all these years. Ethan's mind reeled with questions. The boss he'd been trying to impress suddenly had a new dimension, a personal connection he couldn't have imagined. And his mother, the constant in his life, now seemed like a stranger with a past he knew nothing about. As the story unfolded, Ethan began to see his mother in a new light. The strength it must have taken for her to build a life for them, carrying these secrets all along, was staggering. "But Mom," Ethan interjected, a thought suddenly occurring to him, "if you and Mr. Sinclair have this history, how did I end up working for him?" Jennifer's face paled. I didn't know, Ethan. I had no idea Robert was Mr. Sinclair. So I thought it was just a coincidence, a common name. If I had known." The realization hit Ethan like a ton of bricks. His internship, the opportunity he'd been so proud of, had been orchestrated. But by whom? And why? As if reading his thoughts, Jennifer squeezed his hand. "I don't know why Robert hired you, or if he even knows who you are. But I do know this: whatever his reasons, they're bound to be complicated." Ethan's head spun with questions. Did Robert Sinclair know who he was? Was this all an elaborate plan to reconnect with the family he'd lost, or was there something more sinister at play? As the night wore on and more details emerged, Ethan felt as if he were assembling a jigsaw puzzle with half the pieces missing. Each revelation brought more questions, more confusion. "There's so much more to tell you, Ethan," Jennifer said, exhaustion evident in her voice. "But it's late, and this is a lot to process." Ethan nodded, his mind still reeling. As he stood to go to his room, a thought struck him. "Mom," he said, turning back, "what do I do now? How do I face Mr. Sinclair knowing all this?" Jennifer's eyes filled with a mixture of love and concern. "That's something you'll have to decide for yourself, sweetheart. But whatever you choose, know that I'm here for you. Always." As Ethan lay in bed that night, sleep eluding him, he couldn't shake the feeling that this was just the beginning. The photograph that had started it all seemed to haunt him, a constant reminder of the secret still to be uncovered. Little did he know the real storm was yet to come. The truth, with all its complexities and consequences, was waiting just around the corner, ready to change his life forever. Viewers, if you're as intrigued by Ethan's unfolding story as we are, don't forget to subscribe to our channel. You won't want to miss what happens next in this gripping tale of family secrets and corporate intrigue. Hit that subscribe button now to stay updated on all our captivating stories. The revelation of his mother's connection to Robert Sinclair sent Ethan's world into a tailspin. As he walked into Sinclair Enterprises the next morning, the gleaming facade of the building seemed to mock him, hiding secrets behind its reflective windows. Every interaction, every glance from a co-worker took on new meaning. Did they know? Were they all part of some grand deception? Ethan found himself scrutinizing Robert Sinclair with newfound intensity. The powerful CEO's every gesture, every word, became a potential clue. Was that a flicker of recognition in his eyes when he greeted Ethan? Did his voice soften imperceptibly when he asked about Ethan's mother? Unable to confront Robert directly, Ethan threw himself into uncovering the truth. Lunch breaks were spent poring over old newspapers in the public library, searching for any mention of Robert Sinclair's past. And evenings were dedicated to scouring the internet for information, piecing together a timeline of Robert's rise to power and his mother's life before Ethan was born. As the days passed, Ethan's obsession grew. He began to notice discrepancies in the company's public records, odd gaps in Robert's history that no one seemed to question. The more he dug, the more he realized that the mystery extended far beyond his own family. One evening, as Ethan was leaving the office late, he overheard a heated conversation between Robert and another executive. The words cover-up and liability drifted through the partially open door, sending a chill down Ethan's spine. What was Robert Sinclair hiding? Determined to uncover the truth, Ethan made a bold decision. He would use his position as an intern to gain access to confidential information. It was risky, potentially illegal, but the need to know outweighed any concerns about consequences. Under the guise of organizing old files, Ethan began to sift through years of company records. He discovered a pattern of questionable business practices, shell companies, and mysterious financial transactions. But more importantly, he found hints of a personal connection between Robert Sinclair and his own family that went beyond just knowing his mother. As Ethan delved deeper, he uncovered references to a project called Phoenix, dating back to the year of his birth. The details were vague, but it seemed to involve substantial payments to a series of unnamed individuals. Could one of those individuals have been his mother? The turning point came when Ethan stumbled upon a locked filing cabinet in a forgotten corner of the records room. Using skills he'd rather not admit to possessing, he managed to open it. Inside, he found a folder with his name on it. With trembling hands, Ethan opened the folder. Inside were documents detailing his entire life, school records, medical history, even surveillance photos. But it was the document on top that made his blood run cold. It was a DNA test, comparing his genetic profile to that of Robert Sinclair. The implications were staggering. Robert Sinclair wasn't just a figure from his mother's past, he was Ethan's biological father. Reeling from this discovery, Ethan barely made it home that night. His mind was a whirlwind of questions and emotions. Why had his mother lied to him all these years? Why had Robert Sinclair kept his distance, only to orchestrate Ethan's internship at his company? And what was the true nature of Project Phoenix? As Ethan sat in his darkened room, the weight of these secrets pressing down on him, he knew he had a choice to make. He could confront his mother and Robert with what he'd learned, potentially destroying the life he'd known. Or he could keep digging, unraveling the full extent of the deception that had shaped his entire existence. With a deep breath, Ethan made his decision. He would continue his investigation, but this time he would be more careful. He would play the role of the eager intern, all while piecing together the puzzle of his own identity and the secrets of Sinclair Enterprises. As dawn broke, Ethan steeled himself for the challenges ahead. He was no longer just an intern trying to make his mark in the corporate world. He was a son searching for the truth about his family, a detective unraveling a complex web of lies, and potentially the key to exposing a corporate conspiracy that went far beyond anything he could have imagined. The game had changed, and Ethan was determined to see it through to the end, no matter the cost. Little did he know, his decision would set in motion a chain of events that would shake the foundations of Sinclair Enterprises and forever alter the course of his life. The following weeks were a whirlwind of deception and discovery for Ethan. By day, he played the role of the eager intern, his facade of enthusiasm masking the turmoil within. By night, he was a sleuth, piecing together the fragments of his fractured past and the murky history of Sinclair Enterprises. Every interaction with Robert Sinclair became a complex dance of hidden meanings and unspoken truths. Ethan found himself studying the older man's face, searching for traces of himself in those piercing blue eyes or the strong line of his jaw. The resemblance, now that he knew to look for it, was undeniable. "Excellent work on the Johnson account, Ethan," Robert would say. his hand resting briefly on Ethan's shoulder. The touch, once a source of pride, now sent a jolt of confusion through Ethan. Was this fatherly pride or merely a boss's approval? At home, the atmosphere was equally charged. Jennifer, sensing her son's distraction, tried to draw him out. "Is everything okay at work, honey?" she'd ask, her eyes searching his face. Ethan would force a smile, hating the lies that now stood between them. "Everything's fine, Mom. Just learning a lot," he'd reply, the half-truth bitter on his tongue. As Ethan delved deeper into the mystery of Project Phoenix, he uncovered a trail of shell companies and offshore accounts. The project, it seemed, was more than just a corporate initiative. It was a web of secrets that spanned decades, with tendrils reaching into the highest echelons of power. Late one night, as Ethan pored over financial records he'd discreetly copied from the company's archives, a name caught his eye: Michael Carter. His breath caught in his throat. This was the name of the man he'd always believed to be his father, the man whose death had left a void in his childhood. But according to these records, Michael Carter wasn't dead. He was a beneficiary of Project Phoenix, receiving regular payments to an account in the Cayman Islands. The last transaction was dated just 3 months ago. The revelation sent Ethan's mind reeling. If Michael was alive, why had his mother lied? And what was his connection to Sinclair Enterprises? As Ethan grappled with these new questions, he found himself withdrawing from both his mother and his colleagues. The weight of his secrets became a physical burden, stooping his shoulders and darkening the circles under his eyes. Jennifer, worried about her son's sudden change, tried to reach out. "Ethan, please talk to me," she pleaded one evening, a hand on his arm. "Whatever's bothering you, we can face it together." But Ethan looked at his mother, the woman who had raised him alone, who had worked 2 jobs to put food on the table and clothes on his back. He saw the love in her eyes, but also the fear that the carefully constructed life she'd built was about to crumble. "I'm fine, Mom," he lied, hating himself for it, "just stressed about work." At Sinclair Enterprises, Robert Sinclair watched Ethan with growing concern. The boy, his son, though Ethan didn't know he knew, was changing. The bright-eyed eagerness was being replaced by a wary watchfulness, a hardness that Robert recognized all too well. "Ethan," Robert called out one afternoon as Ethan was leaving his office. "Is everything all right? You seem distracted lately." Ethan froze, his heart pounding. Did Robert suspect? Had he discovered Ethan's late-night investigations? "I'm fine, Mr. Sinclair," he managed, forcing a smile. "Just trying to learn as much as I can." Robert nodded, but his eyes were troubled. "Remember, Ethan, my door is always open if you need to talk." As Ethan walked away, he couldn't help but wonder, was this the concern of a boss for a promising employee, or a father for his son? The dual life was taking its toll on Ethan. By day, he attended meetings, compiled reports, and tried to act like the intern he was supposed to be. By night, he lost himself in a labyrinth of financial records and corporate memos, searching for the truth about Project Phoenix and his own identity. One night, as Ethan sat surrounded by stacks of documents in his small apartment, a memory surfaced. He was 5 years old, standing in a park with his mother. A man was watching them from a distance, his face obscured by shadow. When young Ethan had asked who the man was, his mother had quickly ushered him away, her face pale and frightened. Now, with adult eyes, Ethan wondered, had that been Robert Sinclair, watching his son from afar, or perhaps Michael Carter, the father he'd thought was dead? As the weeks passed, Ethan's investigation began to yield results. He uncovered a pattern of corporate espionage, bribery, and cover-ups that stretched back decades. At the heart of it all was Project Phoenix, a shadowy initiative that seemed to be part slush fund, part witness protection program. But with each answer came new questions. Why was Robert Sinclair, a man known for his business acumen and philanthropy, involved in such dubious dealings? And how did Ethan's family fit into this complex web of deceit? As Ethan stood at the precipice of truth, he realized that the next step would change everything. To move forward, he would have to confront the lies that had shaped his life. He would have to face Robert Sinclair, not as an intern, but as a son demanding answers. And he would have to ask his mother the questions he'd been afraid to voice. The stage was set for a confrontation that would shake the foundations of Sinclair Enterprises and forever alter the course of Ethan's life. As he prepared himself for what was to come, Ethan couldn't help but wonder, in the pursuit of truth, what would be left of the life he'd known? The Sinclair mansion loomed before Ethan, its imposing facade a stark contrast to the turmoil in his heart. The invitation to dinner had come unexpectedly, hand-delivered by Robert's personal assistant. "Mr. Sinclair would like to discuss your future with the company," the note had said, but Ethan knew this was more than a business meeting. As he stood at the door, his finger hovering over the doorbell, Ethan felt the weight of the past few months bearing down on him. He'd convinced his mother to join him, telling her it was time to face the past. Jennifer had agreed reluctantly, her face a mix of fear and determination. The door opened, revealing Robert Sinclair. For a moment he stood frozen, his eyes darting between Ethan and Jennifer. "You came," he whispered, his voice thick with emotion. "Both of you." The dinner began in awkward silence, the clinking of cutlery against fine china the only sound in the opulent dining room. Robert cleared his throat. "I suppose we should address the elephant in the room," he began. But before he could continue, Jennifer interrupted. "Why, Robert? Why now, after all these years?" Robert's face crumpled. "I've been trying to make amends for so long, Jennifer. Those letters." "I never read them," Jennifer cut in. "Not until recently." The revelation seemed to physically pain Robert. He turned to Ethan. "And you? How much do you know?" Ethan took a deep breath. "I know you're my biological father. I know about Project Phoenix. I know about the surveillance, the offshore accounts, the cover-ups." His voice grew stronger with each revelation. "What I don't know is why. Why the secrecy? Why keep me in the dark all these years?" As the truth began to unfold, the dining room became a stage for long-buried secrets and painful revelations. Robert spoke of his deep regret, of years spent trying to protect Jennifer and Ethan from a danger he'd inadvertently brought into their lives. "It started with a business deal gone wrong," Robert explained, his voice heavy with remorse. "I uncovered evidence of widespread corruption, reaching to the highest levels of government. I thought I could expose it, be a hero. But I was naive. They came after me, threatened everything I held dear." Jennifer gasped, realization dawning on her face. "The men who followed us, the reason we had to move so often." Robert nodded grimly. "I had to push you away to keep you safe. Project Phoenix was my attempt to protect you and others who were in danger. The offshore accounts, the fake identities, it was all to keep you hidden." Ethan's mind reeled. The father he'd resented for abandoning them had been protecting them all along. But one piece of the puzzle was still missing. "What about Michael Carter?" he asked. "The man I thought was my father." A heavy silence fell over the room. Jennifer's face paled, and Robert's hands clenched into fists. It was Jennifer who finally spoke, her voice barely above a whisper. "Michael was an agent assigned to protect us," she said. He died protecting you, Ethan. The car accident wasn't an accident at all." The revelation hit Ethan like a physical blow. The father he'd mourned, the man whose memory he'd cherished, had been yet another layer of deception. As the full story emerged, Ethan felt as if he were watching a movie of someone else's life. The family he thought he knew was crumbling before his eyes, replaced by a complex web of love, guilt, and missed opportunities. Robert reached out, his eyes pleading. "I wanted to tell you so many times, Ethan. When I hired you as an intern, I thought I could finally be close to you, even if you didn't know the truth." Then Ethan stood abruptly, his chair scraping against the floor. "You've had years to tell me the truth. In both you," he said, his voice shaking with anger and hurt. "Instead, you let me live a lie." Jennifer rose, reaching for her son. "Ethan, please, we only wanted to protect you." But Ethan stepped back, shaking his head. "Protect me? By lying to me my entire life? By letting me believe my father was dead when he was alive and watching me from afar?" The weight of the revelations pressed down on Ethan, suffocating him. He needed air, needed to escape the suffocating pressure of years of lies and half-truths. "I need time," he said, backing towards the door. "Time to process all of this." As he turned to leave, Robert called out, his voice breaking. "Ethan, son, please." But Ethan was already gone, the door slamming behind him with a finality that echoed through the mansion. Left behind, Robert and Jennifer stared at each other, the weight of their choices hanging heavy between them. The truth was out, but at what cost? As Ethan drove into the night, his mind a whirlwind of emotions, he couldn't help but wonder if the truth had set him free or simply trapped him in a new kind of prison. If you're as captivated by Ethan's emotional journey as we are, we'd love to hear from you. Leave a comment with the number 1 to let us know you're enjoying the story and would like to hear more tales like this. Your feedback helps us bring you the content you love. The days following the explosive dinner at the Sinclair mansion were a blur of pain and confusion for Ethan. He called in sick to work, unable to face the reality of seeing Robert, his biological father, in the office. The apartment he shared with Jennifer, once a haven of comfort, now felt suffocating, every corner a reminder of the lies that had shaped his life. Ethan found himself wandering the streets of the city, a ghost in his own life. The towering skyscrapers that had once represented his ambitions now seemed to mock him, their gleaming facades hiding who knew what secrets. He avoided his usual haunts, fearing to run into colleagues or friends who might ask questions he couldn't answer. At night, sleep eluded him. When he did manage to drift off, his dreams were a chaotic mix of memories and imagined scenarios. He saw himself as a child, playing in a park while Robert watched from afar. He relived the moment he'd discovered the truth about his parentage, but in his dreams, the documents burst into flames, leaving him with nothing but ashes. Jennifer tried to reach out, leaving voicemails filled with tears and pleas for forgiveness. "Ethan, please," her voice would crack. "Let me explain. Let me try to make this right." But Ethan couldn't bring himself to return her calls. The sound of her voice, once a source of comfort, now felt like sandpaper on his raw emotions. Robert, too, made attempts to contact him. Emails arrived in Ethan's inbox, each one carefully worded, trying to bridge the chasm that had opened between them. "I know I have no right to ask for your forgiveness," one message read, "but please know that everything I did out of love for you and your mother." Ethan read the emails compulsively, dissecting each word, looking for what? A magic phrase that would make everything okay? An explanation that would suddenly justify a lifetime of lies? But no matter how many times he read them, the hurt remained, a constant ache in his chest. As days turned into weeks, the emotional toll began to show. Ethan, once a bright and ambitious young man, became withdrawn and sullen. He spent his days alternating between bouts of anger and periods of numbing depression. The internship he had been so proud of was now just another painful reminder of the lies that had shaped his life. One afternoon, as Ethan sat in a small cafe, nursing a cold cup of coffee and staring blankly at the passers-by, he caught a glimpse of his reflection in the window. The face staring back at him was haggard, with dark circles under the eyes and a stubble that spoke of days of neglect. He barely recognized himself. In that moment, the full weight of his loss hit him. He had lost not just one father, but two. The memory of Michael Carter, the man he had believed to be his dad, was now tainted with doubt and confusion. And Robert, his biological father, was a virtual stranger, a man he wasn't sure he could ever truly know or trust. Ethan's mind drifted to the life he had imagined for himself just a few short weeks ago. He had seen a future filled with success, built on the foundation of his internship at Sinclair Enterprises. He had dreamed of making his mother proud, of perhaps one day having a family of his own. Now, all of those dreams seemed to turn to dust in his hands. The Project Phoenix file still sat in his apartment, a Pandora's box of secrets that he couldn't bring himself to destroy, but couldn't bear to examine further. The truth they contained had not set him free as he had hoped, but had instead trapped him in a prison of doubt and disillusionment. As the weeks wore on, Ethan found himself at a crossroads. He couldn't go back to the life he had known. The illusion of normalcy had been shattered beyond repair. But moving forward seemed impossible, each potential path clouded by the lies of the past. One night, as he lay sleepless in his bed, Ethan made a decision. He couldn't stay here, surrounded by reminders of his shattered life. He needed to get away, to find himself amidst the wreckage of his family's secrets. With shaking hands, he began to pack a bag, unsure of where he was going but certain that he couldn't stay. As dawn broke, Ethan stood at the bus station, a duffel bag at his feet and a one-way ticket in his hand. He had left a brief note for his mother, unable to face her or explain his need to escape. As he boarded the bus, Ethan felt a mixture of fear and relief. He was leaving behind everything he had ever known, every comfort and certainty. But he was also leaving behind the lies and secrets that had defined his life for so long. The bus pulled away from the station, carrying Ethan towards an uncertain future. As the familiar streets of his hometown faded into the distance, he couldn't help but wonder, was he running away from his problems, or taking the first step towards finding himself? As dawn broke, Ethan stood at the bus station, a duffel bag at his feet and a one-way ticket in his hand. He had left a brief note for his mother, unable to face her or explain his need to escape. Just as he was about to board the bus, his phone buzzed with a message. It was from an unknown number. "Ethan, it's Michael. We need to talk. Meet me at Miller's Pond, please." Ethan froze, his mind reeling. Michael, the man he had believed to be his father, the man he had mourned for years, was alive. It had to be a cruel joke. Yet something in the message's tone, the mention of Miller's Pond where they used to fish together, made Ethan's heart race. Against his better judgment, he abandoned his plan to leave town and headed for the pond instead. As he approached the familiar spot, Ethan saw a figure standing by the water's edge. The man turned, and Ethan's breath caught in his throat. It was unmistakably Michael, older and weathered, but alive. "Hello, son," Michael said, his voice gruff with emotion. Ethan stood rooted to the spot, a maelstrom of emotions swirling within him. "How? You're supposed to be dead," he managed to choke out. Michael's face contorted with pain and regret. "I know, and I'm sorry. I never meant for things to go this far." As they sat on the old wooden dock, Michael began to unravel a tale that was even more incredible than the revelations of the past weeks. "I always knew you weren't my biological son," Michael admitted, his eyes fixed on the still waters of the pond. "Jennifer told me everything before we got married. But it didn't matter to me. I loved you as my own from the moment I laid eyes on you." Ethan listened, stunned, as Michael explained how he had discovered Robert's continued involvement in their lives. The job offer, the financial support, it had all been orchestrated by Robert. "I was angry at first," Michael continued. "I felt like Robert was trying to buy his way into our lives. But then I realized he was just trying to make amends in the only way he knew Aishi." But the real shock came when Michael revealed the truth about his death. "Robert came to me with a proposition," Michael said, his voice heavy with the weight of his confession. "He had uncovered some illegal activities within the company, activities that went all the way to the top. He needed someone on the inside to help him gather evidence, someone who could operate without suspicion. The staged car accident, the years of absence, it had all been part of an elaborate plan to bring down a criminal enterprise that had infiltrated Sinclair Enterprises. Michael had been working undercover, feeding information to Robert and the authorities. We thought it would take a few months at most," Michael said, shaking his head. "But the deeper we dug, the more complex it became. Years passed, and I couldn't find a way to come back without putting you and Jennifer in danger." Ethan's mind was spinning. The father he had mourned had been alive all along, working alongside his biological father to uncover a criminal conspiracy. It was almost too much to process. "But why now?" Ethan asked, his voice barely above a whisper. "Why come back after all these years?" Michael's eyes met Ethan's, filled with a mixture of hope and trepidation. "Because it's almost over, son. We're close to bringing down the entire operation. And I couldn't bear the thought of you leaving town without knowing the truth." As Michael continued his tale, Ethan learned of the sacrifices both Michael and Robert had made. They had given up their families, their reputations, everything they held dear, to protect those they loved and to right a terrible wrong. "I know we've all made mistakes," Michael said, reaching out to place a hand on Ethan's shoulder. "Kept secrets we shouldn't have. But maybe, just maybe, there's a chance for us to be a family again. All of us." Ethan sat in stunned silence, trying to reconcile this new information with everything he thought he knew. The anger and betrayal he had felt towards Robert and Jennifer began to shift, transforming into something more complex. "What happens now?" Ethan asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Michael squeezed Ethan's shoulder gently. "That's up to you, son. But whatever you decide, know that we all love you. We've always loved you." As the sun began to set over Miller's Pond, casting a golden glow across the water, Ethan found himself at a crossroads. The truth he had sought had turned out to be far more complicated than he could have ever imagined. Now he faced a choice: to run from this tangled web of family secrets, or to stay and try to weave something new from the broken threads of their shared past. The decision he would make in the coming moments would not only shape his own future, but potentially change the course of Sinclair Enterprises and the lives of everyone he loved. As Ethan looked out over the tranquil waters, he realized that sometimes the hardest truths to face are the ones that offer the greatest possibility for redemption and new beginnings. As the golden light of sunset faded into twilight, Ethan and Michael made their way back to town. The weight of secrets and lies seemed to lift with each step, replaced by a cautious hope for what might come next. They arrived at Jennifer's house to find her sitting on the porch, her face etched with worry. When she saw Michael, her eyes widened in disbelief. "Michael," she whispered, rising to her feet, "is it really you?" The reunion was tearful and fraught with emotion. As Michael explained his story to Jennifer, Ethan watched the interplay between them, seeing for the first time the depth of love and sacrifice that had shaped his family's history. A knock at the door interrupted their conversation. Robert stood on the threshold, his face a mixture of hope and trepidation. "I saw Michael's car," he said softly. "I thought, I hoped." For a moment tension filled the air. Then Ethan, surprising even himself, stepped forward and opened the door wider. "Come in," he said. "I think it's time we all talked." What followed was a night of painful truths, heartfelt apologies, and tentative forgiveness. As the full story unfolded, Ethan began to see each person in a new light. Jennifer, the mother who had sacrificed everything to protect him. Michael, the father who had loved him unconditionally, regardless of blood. And Robert, the biological father who had spent years trying to make amends for his past mistakes. As dawn broke, casting its first light on this newly formed family, Ethan realized that the truth, complex and painful as it was, had set them all free. "I can't promise it will be easy," Ethan said, looking at each of them in turn. "But I think I'd like to try. To be a family, I mean. All of us." The relief and joy on their faces was palpable. It wasn't a fairy tale ending. There were still hurts to heal, trust to rebuild, and a criminal conspiracy to unravel. But it was a beginning, a chance to forge something new from the ashes of their past. In the weeks that followed, they worked together to bring the truth to light. The illegal activities at Sinclair Enterprises were exposed, justice was served, and the company was rebuilt on a foundation of integrity. Ethan returned to his internship, this time with a full understanding of his place in the company and in his complex family. He worked alongside Robert, learning not just about business, but about the father he never knew he had. As for Jennifer and Michael, they rekindled the love that had brought them together all those years ago, stronger now for the trials they had endured. One evening, as the family sat together on the porch of the Sinclair mansion, watching the sunset, Ethan reflected on the journey that had brought them to this moment. The old photograph that had started it all now sat on the mantelpiece inside, a reminder of the past but no longer a harbinger of secrets. "You know," Ethan said, breaking the comfortable silence, "I never thought I'd say this, but I'm grateful for that internship. If I hadn't taken it, who knows if we'd ever have found our way to the truth." Robert chuckled, placing a hand on Ethan's shoulder. "Sometimes, son, the best things in life come from the most unexpected places." Jennifer smiled, leaning into Michael's embrace, and sometimes she added, "The family you choose is just as important as the family you're born into." As the last rays of sunlight painted the sky in hues of gold and pink, Ethan felt a sense of peace wash over him. The road ahead would not be easy, but for the first time in his life, he felt truly whole. The story of the Sinclair family was far from over. In fact, it was just beginning, but now, with the truth as their foundation, they were ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead together. In the labyrinth of life, our deepest wounds often lead us to our greatest truths. Ethan's journey reminds us that family isn't just about blood, but about the bonds we forge through love, sacrifice, and forgiveness. The lies that once threatened to tear them apart became the very foundation for a stronger, more authentic connection. It teaches us that sometimes we must face the pain of our past to embrace the beauty of our future. Remember, every secret revealed is an opportunity for healing, every mistake a chance for redemption. Like Ethan, we all have the power to turn our pain into purpose, our confusion into clarity. In the end, it's not the family we're born into, but the family we choose to build through understanding, acceptance, and unconditional love that truly defines us. Your story, like Ethan's, is still being written. Have the courage to face your truths, the strength to forgive, and the wisdom to see that even in our darkest moments, love can light the way home. Dear viewers, we hope Ethan's journey has touched your hearts as much as it has ours. We'd love to hear your thoughts and feelings about this emotional roller coaster. What would you have done in Ethan's shoes? How do you think his future will unfold with his newfound family? If this story resonated with you, please don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to our channel. Your support is the driving force behind our passion for storytelling. It motivates us to bring you more compelling narratives that explore the complexities of family, love, and forgiveness. Leave a comment below sharing your favorite moment from Ethan's story, or what you hope to see in future tales. Every like, share, and subscription helps us continue crafting these intricate, heartfelt stories for you. Remember, in the tapestry of life, even the darkest threads can lead to the most beautiful patterns. Thank you for joining us on this journey, and stay tuned for more captivating stories that remind us of the power of truth, love, and second chances.